7:30 in the morning. The house looked completely normal. So where were the three women who were supposed to be inside? Why were their cars still outside? Why were their belongings still inside? And why did nobody see them leave? Sherrill Levitt, her daughter Suzanne Streeter, and Suzanne's friend Stacy McCall. Three women, one house. And somewhere between 2:15 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., all three vanished. No confirmed sighting, no goodbye, no clear trail. So who came to that house? And how do you make three people disappear without leaving behind an answer? June 6, 1992. Suzanne Streeter and Stacy McCall had just graduated from high school. They spent the night celebrating with friends, moving between graduation parties across Springfield. They were supposed to sleep at a friend's house that night, but that plan changed. The house was too crowded. So they decided to go to Suzanne's home instead. That decision would become one of the most important details in the entire case, because Suzanne's mother, Sherrill Levitt, was already there. She was 47 years old, and at around 11:15 p.m., she was talking to a friend on the phone about something completely ordinary, painting an armoire in her bedroom. Nothing about the conversation suggested danger. It would be the last known contact anyone had with Sherrill. Then, sometime after 2 o'clock in the morning, Suzanne and Stacy left their final graduation party. 2:15 a.m. That is the last confirmed sighting of either girl. After that, nothing. Investigators believe the girls went to Suzanne's house. Their cars were later found there. Their belongings were still inside. Everything suggested they had made it home, and that creates the first real mystery. If they made it home, what happened next? By 7:30 that morning, all three women were gone. No confirmed sighting, no goodbye, no obvious explanation. Their friends were expecting to see them that morning. There were plans for the day, a water park, a normal Sunday after graduation. Instead, they went looking for their friends and found the house. The cars were there, the belongings were there, but the three women weren't. By late morning, nobody was asking why Suzanne and Stacy hadn't shown up. They were asking a much worse question. Why was there no reason for them to be gone? Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend went to the Delmar Street house. The front door was unlocked. The cars were still outside. And inside, almost everything was exactly where it should have been. Purses, keys, personal belongings. Even the family dog Cinnamon was still inside. Nothing looked like three people had packed up and left. Because they hadn't. At least, that's what the house seemed to say. Then Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, arrived, and investigators would later identify one detail that stood out. The glass cover on the porch light had been shattered. It was one of the few visible signs that something might have happened. But there was a problem. Before investigators fully understood that they might be looking at an abduction, people had already been moving through the house. Someone swept up the broken glass. Things were touched. Things were moved. And potential evidence was disappearing before anyone knew what they were looking for. Then investigators learned about something even harder to recover, an answering machine message. Someone had left a message at the house. Investigators later considered it unusual enough to want to know exactly what had been said, but there was no recording left to examine. The message had been played and erased. No voice, no words, no timestamp. Just someone's memory of what the message might have contained. And suddenly, the house became the center of a disappearance that made almost no sense. Three women were missing. Three cars were still outside. Their belongings were still inside. The dog was still there. The front door was unlocked, and the only obvious physical damage was a broken porch light. Police increasingly believed they were dealing with an abduction. But that raised an even harder question. How do you take three people from a house without leaving a house full of evidence behind? And by the time investigators began looking for that evidence, some of it was already gone. The first days of the investigation created a terrifying problem. There were possibilities everywhere, but almost no evidence strong enough to prove any of them. Police had the house, they had 3 missing women, they had the cars, the purses, the keys, the belongings, but they didn't have the one thing they needed most: a clear trail. So investigators began searching beyond the house, rural properties, lakes, roads around Springfield, and soon tips began pointing towards something investigators couldn't ignore: a green van. Witnesses reported seeing a suspicious green van around the time of the disappearance. In a case with almost no physical evidence, even a vehicle could become important. But there was a problem. A suspicious vehicle isn't proof of a crime, and the green van never gave investigators the answer they needed. Then another name entered the case: Robert Craig Cox. Cox had a criminal history that made investigators take him seriously. He had been convicted of murder in Florida, and he had been in Springfield around the time the 3 women disappeared. When questioned, Cox said he had been home alone in bed that night. Then, years later, while serving a prison sentence in Texas, Cox was interviewed by a journalist about the case, and he made a disturbing claim. He said the 3 women were dead. But that created an even bigger question. How could he know? Cox never provided evidence that could prove his claim. A grand jury examined information connected to the case in 1996. No charges followed. Cox remained a name investigators couldn't ignore but couldn't prove, and that became the pattern of the Springfield Three. A lead appeared, investigators followed it, it collapsed. Then another appeared. In 2002, investigators followed another report involving men and a green van at a concrete company. This time, something happened that changed the search. Cadaver dogs alerted. Bones were recovered. For a moment, investigators had something physical. Could this finally be where the 3 women were found? The bones were tested. They were far too old. Another lead was dead. And the case returned to the same impossible problem. There were theories, there were suspects, there were searches, but none of them could explain what had happened inside that house. Which brought investigators back to the same 5-hour gap: 2:15 a.m., the last confirmed sighting; 7:30 a.m., the moment the women were discovered missing. Somewhere between those 2 times, 3 women disappeared. The case refused to disappear. Every few years, another lead brought investigators back to the same question: could the women finally be found? In 2003, investigators searched farmland south of Cassville after receiving another tip. They recovered what appeared to be possible blood evidence. They also found part of a green vehicle that seemed potentially consistent with the van witnesses had described. For a moment, the old theory was alive again. Was the green van finally connected to the women? Testing followed. The blood was inconclusive. The vehicle fragment proved nothing. Another possibility disappeared. But then came an even stranger lead. Investigators received information suggesting the women could have been buried beneath the parking structure at Cox Health. The location was searched using ground-penetrating radar, and the scan produced something unsettling. 3 objects. 3. The same number as the missing women. For anyone watching the investigation unfold, this could have been the moment everything changed. Investigators had spent years searching for something underground. Now the ground itself appeared to be giving them an answer. But when the area was investigated further, the remains they needed were not there. Another lead, another search, another dead end. And this was becoming the defining pattern of the Springfield Three. Every time the case seemed to move forward, the evidence pulled it back. Thousands of tips came in over the years. Suspicious vehicles, possible sightings, remote properties, possible burial sites. Investigators followed them because somewhere inside all that noise could be the one piece of information that mattered. But nothing produced the women. And eventually, every search brought investigators back to the same place: the house. Their cars had been left behind. Their belongings had been left behind. and no confirmed evidence has ever established where the three women went after entering that house. So the question became more disturbing with every passing year. If they didn't leave voluntarily, who came to the house that night? After more than 3 decades, the Springfield Three still has no confirmed answer. No bodies, no charges, no confirmed account of what happened inside the house that morning. There are theories, there are suspects, there are thousands of tips. But a theory isn't a fact, and a suspicion isn't proof. Even Robert Craig Cox, one of the most persistent names connected to the case, was never charged with the women's disappearance. His claim that he knew they were dead was never proven. So investigators are left with something far more frustrating than a missing suspect. They have a missing timeline. At approximately 2:15 a.m., Suzanne and Stacy were last seen. By 7:30, all 3 women were gone. Somewhere inside those 5 hours, something happened. Maybe someone entered the house. Maybe the women were taken somewhere else. Maybe the answer is still hidden somewhere investigators have already searched. But none of those possibilities has been proven. And that's what makes this case different. After 34 years, investigators don't have a lack of theories. They have a lack of certainty. The house is gone now. The women are still missing. And that 5-hour gap remains. 2:15 a.m., 7:30 a.m., 5 hours, 3 women, and no one can say with certainty what happened inside that house. 34 years later, they're still missing. Sherrill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, Stacy McCall. 3 women who walked into a house in Springfield and never came home. Their cars were left behind, their belongings were left behind, but the 3 women disappeared. Every major theory has been investigated, leads have come and gone, searches have turned up nothing, and no one has ever been able to close those missing 5 hours. 2:15 a.m., 7:30 a.m. Somewhere between those 2 moments is the answer. But after 34 years, nobody knows what it is. The house is gone. The women are still missing, and 3 names remain without an ending. Sherrill, Suzanne, Stacy. Where did they go?